Hey folks, welcome back to Transplant Helper again today. My name is Jim Burrell, and I'm very excited to have you with me today on my brand new series entitled My Story, My Words, where I allow one very special person to tell their story, as you can assume, in their own words. And I'm extremely excited about today's guest that we're going to have with us. His name is Ken Frawley. He has been a longtime viewer / listener / supporter of the channel here. And I definitely will tell you this, he has a story to tell. As a matter of fact, just a little sneak peek into this, his story started in a rather rare place. I don't know if any of you started this way, but his story started actually in the middle of a softball field playing shortstop, where he was just hit by a heart attack of something of that sort, dropped to the ground, and the next thing you want to hear about is his transplant. Now, that's not exactly how it went. He'll tell you really how it went in just a moment. But nonetheless, Ken, it is great to have you with us today. I'm excited that you're going to be a part of this program. And why don't you just start this thing off by telling us a little bit about you?
Hey, Jim. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I've listened for a long time, tried to follow everyone's stories and how interesting it's been to see, everybody talk about how different their experiences are. And I'm, really appreciative of you having me on. My name's Ken Frawley. I'm 30 years old. I was transplanted on August 20th, 2016. Was playing, I played baseball all my life, working as an accountant now. I think that, that's kind of largely encompasses everything about me, without giving too much away.
So, long-time baseball player. I understand now you played baseball in college. You played baseball at pretty much every level possible, as far as right up into the pros, right? You're not quite in the pros yet, but you've been close, right?
Yeah, so I think that would be a fair way to put it. Played through, all the way up through college, played in a couple of, I don't know if they'd be considered semi-pro but highly competitive amateur leagues in the local New York area. There were two different ones that I played in over the years. One for 9 or 10 years. I started when I was in college and playing with that one. So I played against former pros, former college players, the whole like.
So if anybody out there is looking for a good pitcher or shortstop or anything else, you've got them a little something, right? You're ready for that, right?
Well, currently trying to work out with my transplant doctor, labrum surgery, tore my labrum in 2018. So I'm currently on the injured list, but hopefully, to be back somewhat soon and hopefully strike some people out.
All right. Well, I'll be cheering for you. Well, let me get off on what we're really here to talk about. Tell us a little bit about how you were first introduced to transplant. I jokingly already said hit and dropped on the ground. Not exactly, but how did your story begin as far as you needing to face transplant? What brought you to that point?
Yeah, so, you were actually kind of close. Never had any problems health-wise throughout my entire life, through college and all of that. Was just playing in a softball game with a bunch of friends. My younger sister was playing, and in the middle of the first inning, suffered a fatal arrhythmia and dropped right to the ground, right in the middle of the field. They said I was down for about 2.5 minutes, and not sure exactly how it happened, but I woke myself up and realized that there was something terribly wrong with what was going on with my heart.
Well, so there was absolutely no warning. Did you have any pains, or do you recall anything from that day that would have made you think something wasn't right?
No. So, I had worked that day, went through that, no problem. Went to the game that night and didn't have any issue until there was a slow, shallow blooper into left field that my sister caught. And when I was on my way back to my position, I just felt my heart accelerate out of control. And I knew something at that point was very, very wrong. Tried to stop and put my hands on my knees, figured if I could, do that, at least,
right.
The umpires would stop the game, let me give me a second to kind of gather myself, and hopefully it was going to stop, and that would, I could keep going. But yeah, last thing I remember was after I put my hands on my knees, I felt myself start to go back. And next thing I knew, when I opened my eyes, I was looking up at all of my friends, staring down at me.
Right. Well, I'm assuming they immediately got the paramedics, someone there, and they took you straight to the hospital. How did things go from there?
Yeah. So, they did call, the ambulance. I was up before that.
Okay.
But I was, first of all, I wanted to keep playing, which was just about the worst idea possible. But, in my head, we needed to win to make the playoffs. And, I was the shortstop and the 3-hitter, and I felt like, I owed it to my teammates to try to keep going. And, no one was having that. So, they made the decision for me, which I'm very appreciative for. So, just kind of sat in the dugout, waited for the hospital show, or the ambulance to show up. Went and did the test in the ambulance, then ended up going to the hospital, and then was released that night. They didn't really see anything that wrong. They did the blood work and everything, and all they could see in an X-ray was that my heart was enlarged, but they didn't see anything particularly strange on my EKG. And the blood work came back negative for a heart attack. So they weren't 100% sure what they were doing, or what they wanted to do, I should say. Mm-hmm. They suggested staying overnight, but they didn't exactly say that it was a requirement. So I ended up going home. And the following, I started making phone calls to cardiologists, the next morning, right, and found one with Columbia Doctors in White Plains, New York.
Okay. So how long did it take you to get in to see an actual cardiologist and try to get closer to some answers?
So that part was probably the biggest nightmare of everything. It was, knowing something was wrong, and everyone's booked for months in advance. Mm-hmm. So when I ended up calling this office, I don't know why, I just wanted to explain the story that I was a very, very scared 24-year-old who had just passed out the night before in the middle of the field and didn't know what was happening to me and needed answers. And the secretary was nice enough to say, hold on a second, let me go talk to the doctor. He said, okay, come, I'll stay late next Friday. Come see me. We'll talk, and we'll go from there. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. And that was kind of when we started to get an idea. That was when he explained that what he thought I'd gone through was a fatal arrhythmia, and wanted to send me for an echocardiogram, and did an EKG of their own, where he said that the EKG looked awful, and it looked as though I'd had a heart attack just based on like the damage to my heart, which we still don't really know how it got to that point. But since we know that there wasn't a heart attack, but he kind of said the bottom line is like, listen, you need a defibrillator, and you need one fast in case this happens again.
Right.
So kind of went from there, and it was all, a very aggressive, plan of attack moving forward.
Right. So good move on your friend's part that they didn't let you keep playing, which I can already hear in your voice. You definitely would have done that. Good move on the receptionist part, because she actually, the person who was on the other end of the phone, or gave you a chance at least to talk for her to talk with the doctor so you can go ahead and get in. So that was a lifesaver within itself. And now he's doing some testing, but he doesn't really understand what's going on. How much further did you have to go then before? I mean, again, you never have a conclusive answer what happened that time, but how much further were you able to go before you really started having more and more issues and we're getting closer to, I know transplant hasn't been mentioned yet. Are we getting close to that?
Yeah. So I think, after I got the defibrillator in 2014, my original plan with the doctors was to work on getting my ejection fraction up and trying to strengthen the heart that I had, which worked for a while, until the spring of 2016. So maybe a year and a half later.
Okay.
I had just a head cold, and which, that's pretty standard stuff. But a week after, I couldn't breathe anymore. I couldn't make it to my car in the parking lot. After the defibrillator, I bought my dream car, so I was parked that up in the top of the hill in our parking lot, as far from the building as humanly possible. And I realized that I was having to stop and catch my breath just to make it up the hill. And it turned out that what they think happened then was that the virus from that cold had kind of made its way to the heart and finish things off, so to speak. So we put me on a PICC line then, and that was kind of the start of the transplant process. That was right around the 4th of July, 2016.
Okay. Were you having to go in and out of the hospital fairly often at that point, or still just PICC line at the house?
So it was a PICC line at the house. Starting in July, that was kind of the only issue that I had. The problem that we ran into was, speaking with Columbia in New York, the fear was that it was going to take too long for me to get a heart. New York at the time was the worst state in the country for organ transplant. Mm-hmm. And we were kind of ballparking that in 3 to 6 months, if I hadn't received one, they were going to ship me off to Newark Beth Israel or Baylor or Cedar Sinai, because they seemed to say that the pool for organ transplants were much better at those places. Mm-hmm. And I was home at this point, just kind of functionally living, and we decided to ask about Newark because it's close to us. I'm in New York, but we were. So it's just across the river, kind of from Columbia, right across the Hudson River. So we asked, look, shouldn't we be listed there too? So they said, yeah, you should go do that. Go meet these people. And, if you're listed there, take whatever days you've accumulated in New York, shift them over, so that those days are counting in New Jersey, and go from there. So I went to visit Newark Beth Israel in August. So this is maybe just a month later. I thought I was doing okay on the PICC line, but when the doctor walked in, he looked at me and he says, oh, you're still out of breath, even on the Milrinone. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, and the athlete me kicks in, and I'm trying to explain, like, I'm a lot better. We just started a diuretic, I think it's getting a little bit better. And he looks at me and goes, you're still out of breath. And I was like, all right, yeah, still out of breath.
So accepted, yeah.
He kind of had to finally give up a little bit on that. And, he was like, listen, I don't want you to leave the hospital. You're going to stay here, and you're going to be the only B positive blood type that we have here currently. So if we get a B positive heart that, fits, I'm 6'4", and at the time around 250 pounds. So, that the matching the heights and the weights was going to be difficult, but he said, if we find one, it's basically yours. So, that's kind of what we did. I went in, I think it was August 8th or August 9th, 2016. Waited a day or two for all the testing to happen, and, was finally listed for for the heart transplant in Newark. And 7 days later, I got the phone call that they had one for me.
Right. Well, I remember a little bit about your journey back, at least the 2015-ish, 16-ish part. And I remember that it was a concern for your family and some others that, because you were a bigger guy, that you might be that, more of a 1 in a million type match. The weight just because of that might be longer. And a lot of people don't necessarily understand that, but there has to be body typing as far as cavity size. I mean, that's the word they use, the cavity size, that sort of thing has to match. And if it doesn't, the downfall is you give, and I'm making up a scenario here, folks, but you give the smaller heart to a great big guy, and then, yes, he's alive, but he can't walk a flight of stairs. He can't, he just doesn't have the pumping capacity, the volume to do with it what he needs. So I'm glad that your gift ultimately came. So how long were you actually listed then, from the time that they really seriously put you on the list until you actually got your gift?
So I believe technically you're automatically placed on the list when you get the Milrinone, the PICC line pump. So that was, I guess, 1B listing. When I was officially put on 1A, it was about a 7-day wait before I got the phone call.
That's very similar. We were under of course, it's a new listing system now, and so the numbering system's different, but we were under the same system, you and I. And I was listed as a 1B on Milverno for 10 months and then got that 1A status, which thankfully I only had to be listed as a 1A for about a week myself. I had a false alarm, and then the real thing came, but that was only still about a week of being listed at that status 1A, which would be the exact equivalent now of obviously a 1, maybe a 2 is the way the equivalents would come out now. So pretty high at our day, the highest on the list you can be. So only about a week wait. Now that doesn't change the fact that that's as that 1A, I mean, that doesn't change the fact that this has actually gone on for how many years? Did you start this story back in 2013?
So yeah, it was the end of 2014. August 30th, 2014 was the night that I had passed out.
Right.
So less than 2 years. It's funny looking back. It feels like it was so much shorter. It felt like everything happened in the span of just a few months.
Yeah, well, it's a whirlwind no matter what. And I've said that. I've had several of these interviews where, and you mentioned one of them a few minutes ago, where someone waited 2 decades almost before the first sign till the transplant. But it's still a whirlwind because none of us are prepared for what's coming. I mean, the word transplant is just not a word that gets thrown around in most doctors' offices on most days. So it's definitely a shock any way you go. So how about your you get the heart. Was the surgery or the process itself, was that very difficult for you?
No, I like to joke around, that it was probably a lot harder for my parents and family since, I slept through it. Or at least, that's what I think I was doing. They had to sit and wait around for, 5, 6, 7 hours, while they were kind of the doctors were doing their work and, taking me apart and putting me back together again.
Right. So how about recovery after that? Did you come out pretty quickly, and how are you doing now?
Yeah, so I think the recovery part is the thing that I'm most proud of through the entire process. I came out and was raring to go. The entire time that I was in and, was going through all of this process, my sole focus was I wanted to get back on a baseball field. In whatever capacity that I was going to be able to play, I wanted to do that. So I really tried to attack the rehab process as best as possible. Follow everything that they said, and try to make sure that I was pushing myself hard enough that I would make progress, but not hard enough to hurt myself in the long term. I was released from the hospital after 9 days and just got to work. The first couple of days, it was just walking up and down my block, and that was a big accomplishment. I think one thing that people don't realize when they're about to go through the process is how much, after the fact, day after day, the improvement gets, and how much your body, if you're doing things the right way, how much day over day your body can improve. Right. And that was something that was really exciting for me, was seeing exactly how much further I could go every single day, and realizing this isn't going to be a thing that I assumed that was going to be at least a year before I could play again. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, as I'm doing all of this, it started to hey, it might be a month or 2 months before I could really get back out there. And so that's what it was. It was about 5.5 weeks after surgery, I was back on the softball field and playing again. I was still very tight, and I don't think I was probably as best at my absolute peak playing capacity, but I was out there. I was back at shortstop, playing, and that was just about the most exciting thing I think I've had in my life, was that moment where I got back onto the field. And me and my best friend who runs the team kind of kept it a secret from everybody, just to surprise them when I showed up. And showed up ready to go. And yeah, it was a lot of fun getting to do that again. And then the next spring I started playing in the baseball leagues again and pitching again. with the New York Black Sox and the New York City Thunder Dogs, and how great all of those teammates were in the whole process, and encouraging. And there was a lot of frustration as I tried to get back to a level that I was comfortable with, in competing. And I expect a certain level of results, and my teammates were really, really great when it came to that.
Right. Well, I remember some of that. I think it was your mother. Don't quote me on that. I have to go back and look for them, but I think it was your mother was incrementally sending me some pictures and keep me updated a little bit. And it was almost like, and I'm exaggerating for the fun and the emphasis of it, but it was almost like he drove past the baseball field today. He walked up and touched the fence. Here's a picture of him. He's actually in the dugout, that kind of stuff. And the excitement that I know your family, your friends, obviously your teammates and yourself, that was huge, just to know that you were getting back to the thing that not only you love to do, but seemingly, backing up 2 or so years before almost took your life. Not that was to blame, but, I think there's something to be said for conquering that moment, for conquering that time in your life and coming back and being, I don't know what you call it other than being victorious over it and getting to do what you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. We all kind of saw the poeticness of it, I guess you could say, of, kind of getting to close that circle and get back out there. I remember, I ended up experiencing my first heart transplant anniversary came on the day of the game. And I had just been, relieving at that point, just, being a relief pitcher and, kind of getting my feet under me still, and kind of, mentioned to one of my teammates, just like, hey, I wonder if coach will let me start next week, since it's the anniversary. And he was like, yeah, you should ask him. And didn't even give me the chance to ask. Justin went to Coach Angelo and was like, hey, you need to start him next week. So that was a very cool experience to let me get back out there, start. I think I gave up about 4 hits in 7 innings, and that was when I kind of really was like, I'm back to where I wanted to be, performance wise. I don't know if it was the day that kind of gave me that boost. But yeah, it was just great. One of my teammates' girlfriends, Deanna, baked a cake, and it was a heart-shaped cake with fondant on it, and they even put a Band-Aid on the heart. It was a really special thing for me to get to do that day. And that was kind of where I think mentally was like, all right, the recovery part's over. I'm back to normal.
Well, you had worked so hard, and you had definitely earned it. I know your buddy was helping you, trying to do you a favor by running and asking, but at the same time, I believe you were ready. So that was definitely the best part of it, that you had actually accomplished this. You had gotten there. So that's awesome. Well, let me ask you the next question, and this one can be an upper and a downer, and I know you'll handle them both. What would you say? This is just what you say. What would you say have been both the best and the worst things that you've experienced during the transplant process, or maybe because of transplant?
I guess we'll start with the worst part first. Just get the downer part out of the way, and then bring it back up. I think the worst part for me, I think, was the wait in the hospital, and it was short, and I'm so lucky compared to so many other people who spent extended amounts of time in there. One of my closest transplant friends, Bob Schleicher, was in there for months and months. Yeah. So I can only imagine what it's like for some people, but I know for me, being 26 at the time, it was very lonely in a sense. And, my parents and my friends did everything that they could to, keep me company. I had a friend who drove down every single day, from New York, which is about an hour and 15-minute drive to the hospital, just to visit, hang out for an hour, and then would drive home. But there comes a point in the hospital that everyone has to go home, and then you're by yourself, and you're left to your own thoughts. And a lot of that was very lonely for me, and trying to figure out, I don't want to make it sound like I was, it wasn't a form of self-pity, but like trying to understand like why this happened. Did I miss something? Did I, is there something I should have caught sooner that could have avoided this? I was, always an athlete. So suddenly to be able, anything I asked of my body, I could do.
Mm-hmm.
So to suddenly be in a position where I'm asking my body to jump, for example, and my body's telling me absolutely under no circumstances are we jumping, was like, it was very eye opening for me. Like, oh my God, like, what's wrong with me type of thing. So, I think at that point it was very hard to be positive,
right.
And keep believing and, knowing it's very, looking back on it, it's very easy to be like, oh, okay, well, it was just 7 days. And, I think I'd been in the hospital at that point for 10. So, it was a short stay, but you don't know that every night when you're going through it.
Exactly. And not to take away from anyone's much longer wait. You mentioned Bob. I know people the same way. 5-6 months is not even uncommon. I was in the hospital that last time for a month leading up to transplant. You were there for a week. I don't think there's a whole lot of distance between any of those. Yes, situations get more difficult and things can pile up. Like you say, when you go to sleep at night by yourself, not knowing what tomorrow holds, I think that the difficulty of that is the same. It's very much the same. With the exception, and not to take away from any of these situations now, that you and I and the people we're referring to, we did have an opportunity, at least, that family members could come. Boy, people right now just don't have that. The loneliness.
Oh, yeah.
Someone wants to talk about social distancing, being basically locked away in a hospital right now would be extremely difficult. So please pray, everyone pray for anyone who's having difficulty right now. But I've seen so many of those pictures posted in the last year, where I've known people and they're taking a picture of their loved one walking in the hospital by themselves to have a heart transplant. I mean, wow. I don't know what could be more scary or what have you, but yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. The wait is difficult, but the unknown is what's so difficult about that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you put it best. And, my heart goes out to anybody who's waiting currently or going through a hard time at the hospital. That's really next level compared to anything that I went through.
Right. That's definitely a big deal any way you look at it. All right, what about the best thing? Tell us something good. We got to bounce back from that.
Yes. So I'd say the best thing, I didn't realize how many doors it would open for me, the transplant, in terms of, getting to meet other people, getting to visit patients after my transplant. I would go back to Newark and visit any sort of, any patient that was a little bit, on the younger side around my age or, even a little bit younger,
mm-hmm.
and just to talk to them, and, see how they were doing and try to be an example of like, hey, like I know what it's like. I know when you're going through it, you can't imagine that life is just going to go back to normal. You think that it's going to be different, and it is in some ways, but it's so much the same, which is the most like beautiful part of everything, was getting back to that point where everything kind of goes back to normal, and then getting to share that with people and say like, it's like your life's not over just because you're in the hospital and you're going to get a heart transplant. Like it's going to, as soon as you get the surgery, it's just going to get better and better, and, give it some time, and you'll get to a point at some point, and it's different for everybody, but you're going to look back and be like, this is like, I got my life back.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really beautiful thing for me. And, getting to talk to those people, being connected to you for the past 4 years or so, and watching your channel and seeing all these, amazing stories. when Newark reached 1,000 heart transplants, I was lucky enough that they asked me to be one of the people that presented at the gala that they had, and got to briefly meet Queen Latifah, which she was the best, and she performed that night. But yeah, I would say the best part is just the doors that it's opened for me. And I never grew up looking to be someone that sets an example for anybody else. But it's been a blessing to be someone that I think, without presuming, people look up to now as someone who kind of went through something and made it out and turned it into a much, much more positive experience. And that's something I'm really proud about.
Well, I can say it with presuming, because I can presume it on you. You have been a huge inspiration to a lot of people, including myself. And I appreciated knowing a little bit about your journey along the way, keeping in touch just a little bit along the way. And more than that, I recognize the fact of the work that you are already doing to help other people. Like you say, going in these patient rooms then and now, well, not as much now, but then, when you were able to give them that shining light and able to tell them that there's some possibility and that there is, similar to what you put in. I've told people before. I had a lady one day. She was very upset, and she said, "I'm afraid things will never be the same." And I said, "I hope they're not." And she really looked at me strange for a minute. I said, "I hope things are better. I hope that your life is going to change in every way. And never the same it was, that you'll be, as I always say at the end of the programs, that you'll stay stronger, and that's being stronger physically, emotionally, spiritually. Everything will change." And I think you definitely can have been one of those guys who've been an example of that.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that.
Well, I got one more question for you, and this is a big one because I know you got something to say. What would you say, or what biggest piece of advice, we'll call it that, what piece of advice would you like to give to someone who is either waiting for transplant or maybe just straight out of transplant? What good advice have you got for them?
In the shortest words possible, I would just say keep believing in tomorrow is what I try to tell people. Believe that there's good and that you have to fight for it. And when you come out, you'll see all of that good that comes of it. And keep believing in that. And, obviously it's not a physical fight to keep fighting, when you're sick and in a hospital bed, but there is a mental will to it that I think we've all learned through the process. And I think keep believing in that is probably the best advice I could give. There was a quote from, that I've kind of taken through that process as well that I believe very much in, which is, it's from J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of Lord of the Rings. And the quote is, "All we have to decide is what to do with the time that's given to us." And I think that's the most important thing to focus on through that is, you got to fight your butt off and, work through that, but it all gets so much better, and keep believing in that better tomorrow, and you'll get there. You'll always get there.
Absolutely. All we have to do is decide what to do with the time. What'd you say? I'm going to misrepresent that quote, but great quote. Anyway.
That's okay. I have it up on the wall in front of me, actually. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that's given to us.
Absolutely. And that could be the mantra for any transplant recipient right there, because I always summarize everything that I have now in life as opportunity, and an opportunity to give back, an opportunity to give, an opportunity to live is what we've certainly been given. So that's great advice right there. Just keep looking for tomorrow and the possibilities of it. So, well, thank you very much. I've definitely enjoyed hearing your story today, being able to share it with those who have been able to listen. And I just want to say how much I appreciate you. Again, you're an inspiration to me and so many. And if there's anyone out there who has any questions specifically for Ken, I'm sure that if you want to comment below the video or reach out, I'll put you in touch with him. You'll find him. And he'd be more than happy to help you and try his best to answer those questions. And more than that, hopefully to motivate you to keep living and to live this best life you possibly can now as we go along. So Anyway, with that being said, Ken, anything you want to part with?
No, I think that covered everything. Thank you so much for having me. Like I said, I've been a long time fan and really enjoyed everyone else's stories that I've gotten to watch over the years, and how you've spoken to that and all the transplant helper stuff. Before that, even before my transplant, when I was starting to start my journey, I really appreciate all of it. You've been a huge inspiration to me.
Well, thank you. It's been fun. I love what I do, and it's certainly a part of the opportunities we all have. So for everyone who's watching today, again, I'd love to share your story. If you want to send me a text, I'll put my number on the screen right here, and you can send me a text, and we'll get to sharing. But for Ken, thank you for the very last time today. And until next time, stay stronger, friends.